Got you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me and joining us from your homes. Whether you're joining us on NTN television, whether you're joining us on Facebook or other social media, whether you are joining us from the pages of the Vice President, myself, or the PPP, I thank you for being here, and I thank you for giving of your time to be here. And of course, as always, allow me to say good night to my little son, Sawyer. Daddy loves you, but it's time for bed. Now, while we wait for a minute, I'd ask you to, if you wanted to, share the live feed on social media with those that you think might be interested and would be interested to hear what we have to say. Share it to as much as you want. And what I'm going to talk about here tonight, I would really like people to pay attention. It's a serious issue. It's a matter that relates to everything in our country that's going on. We have great development, but unfortunately, we have great demonstration of hate and division from some parties. There is no place in Guyana, or indeed there should be no place in Guyana or elsewhere in the world, for talks of racism and division on the basis of race. Anybody who has a modicum of intellect, intelligence, or even common sense would know that every conversation about racial and ethnic division started by madmen ended in tragedy. There is no place for such behavior here. We should not tolerate it. It has been an issue we have been dealing with repeatedly. And on this program, I've always encouraged everyone to ignore the divisive talk and the divisive speech of others. But I think it's time that now that we do more than simply ignore it. We should call it out. We shouldn't tolerate it, and we should make sure that it comes to an end before it gets tragic. Now, there are some who believe, and indeed everyone has a right to free speech. That's guaranteed by our Constitution. But it is not protected speech by the Constitution to preach hatred and to preach racism. That's not free speech. Now, if we just consider for a minute that we're a country built essentially by those that have been brought here, and the one group that was here, the indigenous peoples, they were here, and the rest of people came here for various reasons. Essentially, it was as laborers to work on the plantations, and we've all come here that way. Our foreparents came here that way. The divisions that have been sought are invisible. Guyana is a country that has become a melting pot where the races coexist and live amongst each other. We recently, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, had Pagua. Everyone plays Pagua. They are Muslim holidays, and everyone partake at some stage when it is at some stages of the holiday, not everyone would fast, but there are other parts that they partake in. There are Christian holidays, Easter and Christmas, which everyone partakes in, regardless of race. Now, it is disturbing that people take such liberties and say such things in public settings in Guyana. Now, if you're usually on this program, you know we don't usually do much in terms of video clips and what others say. But on this occasion, just because of just how repugnant and repulsive these things are, I thought I'd share some bits of it with you. So the first one is a gentleman who now calls himself Takuma Ugunse. He was a member of the WPA. He claims to still be a member of the WPA. And he was at a public rally when he said what we're going to see here in a minute. So the operator is going to play what Takuma Ugunse say. And I just want you to look at what hatred, divisiveness, and if this is not blatant racism, then I don't know what is.
The reality is, what not do? The army, the police, are the majority African Ghanaians. And sisters and brothers, once we organize our people, and once we begin to fight, we will ensure that our brothers and sisters in uniform will do the right thing. And if they do the right thing, this matter is over in days, not weeks. So the struggle is necessary. It has to be long. It has to be strategic. I want to share with you something I share with the people of Baka. I probably for the first time I ever speak about it in public. During the crisis in 2002-2005, we at the WPA met some foreign diplomats, and we were explaining to them the random killings and the behavior of Gajraj and his killers. And at the end of the meeting, a white diplomat put me in a corner. A white diplomat put me in a corner. And he said, I don't understand how people complain that they are oppressed. And they have all the guns in their hands. They are the majority in the army, the majority in the police. And they're still saying they are oppressed. What he was saying that our problem is our own making. Our problem is our own making. Anytime we turn those guns in the right direction, it is over.
Now, that is disturbing for so many reasons. Guyana has a history of racial tension. Guyana has a history. And that man who's speaking, he is a fossil from that history. He is a person who, from that day and age, have those views. Guyana has moved on. Guyana is now integrated. The solutions to our problems can't be in division. We have to learn that we will disagree with each other from time to time. That's how a democracy works. 5 years, well, before 2020, for 5 years, the opposition now was in government. They'd been voted into government. That's how democracy works. What their views were and their decisions on governance was what happened for 5 years. The public and the people of Guyana didn't want any more, voted that there be a change in 2020. The Irfan Ali-led administration and the PPP have come to power since and are making decisions that they see to be in the best interest of Guyana. But there is a man who is a fossil, and he perceives that some sort of racial division is suitable to this country. He talks not so subtly about guns and the armies and the police forces, and we must not tolerate it. To do that is criminal. It is contrary to the laws of Guyana, and we must call it out for what it is. We must stop paying lip service to saying that we maintain law and order, whilst we allow people like that to divide us. Now, the strange thing about hate, it's like love, it spreads. And people will want to say things. And there are people who are disenchanted for various reasons. So it falls on fertile ears. And then it spreads. And then who controls it? For a man from Walter Rodney's party to say those things, and to say that he was doing so in 2003 to 2005, is appalling. And we should never tolerate it. Guyana is moving forward. We're moving forward as a united country. There will always be, no matter what, people who are disenchanted. There will always be claims, no matter where in the world you go. You will have claims of persons of one sector of society benefiting more than others. That happens everywhere in the world. What we have to do is to make sure our courts and our public structures and institutions are strong enough to prevent inequality. There must be equity, but there mustn't be inequality. Now, there are always going to be persons who feel left out for whatever reasons. And because of our history, when you say it, it attracts attention. Doesn't mean it's true. And God forbid anyone were to act on the utterances of such a man. Now, it is unfortunate that in a very short space of time, there are 3 different persons who have taken the liberty to speak out in this way. They all happen to be members of the WPA. And it's disturbing because it appears to be a concerted effort. Now, we mustn't tolerate it, and we must not allow it to be promulgated. There is another clip that I will show you from another member of the WPA, a female member this time. And you have to listen to the hatred, the bitterness, and the derogatory statements to understand why it should never have any part in our society now. And what is said is criminal. Racial speech and hatred is not protected by our Constitution. It can never be free speech. So we'll take a look now at what is being said by a woman member of the WPA.
Who suddenly get in that? Many of them came from the slums of India. And if you who suddenly get in that? Many of them came from the slums of India. And if you look at the amount of persons in India, 1 point something billion to that little landmass,
same stage, you will notice that it's a WPA meeting in Buxton. Now, to say those things are said to say what? Whether the Indians came from the slums in the middle of India. We all came from difficult places. Make no bones about it. We all came from places that were less developed. It was the more developed world that commanded the movements of the people. That they were the ones who owned the sugar plantations. They were the ones who brought labor to work on those plantations. But it doesn't matter where you come from. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go down that road. It doesn't matter where you come from. It's where you are. It's where you're going. It's what you're going to do. It's what you're achieving. And it's sad that two members of the WPA at a rally in Buxton would say these things. Derogatory things that are intended to incite people and hatred. Derogatory things that are criminal and should not be tolerated. And we must not tolerate it. Don't matter what you are disenchanted about. We're all disenchanted about something. Not everything will be your way. And not everything can be your way, regardless of who you are, what race you are, where you're from. It's not all going to be your way. You've got to realize that that's the reality of life. It's a struggle for everyone. But no matter how disenchanted you are, don't fall prey to the nonsense of racism. Because that's not what it is. That is the real problem. There are other issues, other problems. The government is working as hard as it can to bridge the divides. Today you would have seen it announced that the European Union is contributing $1.3, I believe, billion for projects in the Amerindian communities, to fund projects in the Amerindian communities. Now there's a lot of that we need. Guyana is a poor country. Make no bones about it. We've got great prospects. We've got great potential. We're moving very fast. But this was like zero. Guyana was below. We're now catching up. We're now hoping to rise. Something the people of Guyana have always deserved. But we can't get there if we would be divided by such trivial and petty things, such tribal utterances. And make no bones about it, it's selfish. It's for selfish gain. It's for those speakers who want to get into power. That's basically what they want. How are they going to get into power? What are they going to do when they get into power? Are they going to divide the country? What are they going to do? 24% of this country are of mixed race. How are you going to divide them? When are you going to realize that the old base politics of the past, they're for dinosaurs and should be extinct like dinosaurs? Now, it's troubling that both of those speakers spoke on a WPA platform. But here's another man who considers himself to be a member of the WPA. He is also preaching hate against a member of APNU's parliamentary, a PNC member, a member of parliament for APNU, and he calls her a slave catcher, that coward of a man.
I gave Sister Gita a few days to to redeem herself, and she hasn't done so. And she must know that she has become a slave catcher, catching slaves and turning them over to the master. That's what she has done.
That's a man who claims to be an intellectual and a university lecturer, hiding somewhere in the United States and preaching hate in this country. He said he gave her a few days. Who the hell is he to give anyone a few days to do anything? I was on a political program with that clown during the elections, and his solution, when it was obvious that rigging was taking place, is that you should burn the ballot boxes and nobody should ever know what is in there. And he calls himself an intellectual. Oh, please don't let me swear today. He's a coward. He is nothing more than a coward. He wants power for his own reasons, and he's incapable of leading anybody. He's incapable of coming to this country and dealing with the people here and trying to make their lives better. He sits on his arse in the United States and call people names. That's what he's good at. Cowards are always good at that, hiding. And he calls an MP a slave catcher because she condemns the two earliest speakers, saying that the call for hatred and the call of racism is wrong. I hold no brief to defend anyone. Miss Chandan made her statement, and she's capable of defending herself, I'm sure. But he has no right to do that. He is a fossil who never, thank God, got the reins of power. He is only been inciting day after day after day on his television programs. Not television, on Facebook Lives. So let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, something you can do if you don't know. And those views and his views should not be allowed to be promulgated. As I said, being in disagreement with people, you're allowed to disagree. That's democracy. You're allowed to state your positions vociferously. That's freedom of speech. You're not allowed hate. You're not allowed racism. That is wrong. That is divisive. And as I said at the beginning, there is no preaching of that does not end in tragedy. Now, you might feel that because you're disenchanted and you will fall, that will be something that you will gravitate to. Don't fall prey to a madman. Understand, this man is selfish, wants for himself what he cannot have, calls people's names, claims to be an intellectual. Intellectual of what? He is preaching race. And I'll tell you, which I was about to tell you if you don't know, what to do. So he promulgates all these views from some place in the United States where he hides from you. And he exposes these views on Facebook Live, and then it's recorded. So how do you stop it? You report it. On his Facebook page and every other page that he promulgates it. Click on it and report it. Report it as hate speech. Report it as abuse. If all of us do that, he will have no way to spread his hate. And it is not because you simply report it. It means that it will be removed. That's not how it works. So it wouldn't work against people doing legitimate or making legitimate comments. You report it and it will be looked at and it will be analyzed. And when enough people report it, it will be analyzed quicker. He is committing criminal offenses. We have to understand settlement of disputes cannot take place by inciting hatred. What are his views for anything? But you notice, he does not have the gumption, the balls, the courage to be somebody who comes and says that here. At least the two other members of the WPA still do that. Not that it is to any credit of them, don't misunderstand me, but he wouldn't come and do that. So he piggybacks on the sentiment created by them. The same thing happens with Mr. Burke. He piggybacks on what other people do. He doesn't have the imagination or the intellectual fortitude to stand on his own. And he doesn't have the courage to face the people of Guyana. He preaches hate and he calls people's names. And he repeats it and he repeats it. By God, he is a fossil, a throwback from a bygone era. He is a dinosaur and he must be left in the past, extinct. How could we have 3 members of the WPA doing this? And how can we hope to grow a country when we will try to teach each other to hate each other and call each other such derogatory names as slave catcher? How could we do that? We have to be better than that. The Guyana, my Guyana, must be better than that. We as a people must be better than that. We must be stronger than that and resist the temptation to keep reverting back to these old rhetoric and stories. If you feel for any reason disenchanted, look why. There are institutions to help you when all else fails. And if you think that the source of your disenchantment is the government, then your remedy lies at the ballot box. That's how democracy works. If you believe that there is a better choice, whomever you believe is the choice, you should take that choice. But you don't denigrate people. You don't dehumanize them. You don't call them names because they don't share your views. I would think that most right-thinking Guyanese would condemn roundly all statements of racism, all statements of racial hatred, division, anarchy, would condemn that roundly. Because you always think that yes, what you'll do is you will upset the apple cart. Don't be foolish, ladies and gentlemen. That's always a runaway train. History has taught us that. No one controls where that goes. What you're going to be sure of is it will end in tragedy. Death and destruction are the only things if that festers. But it comes to this. What would you say to your fellow Guyanese, your friends, the people you would have gone to school with, the people you live with, the people you work with, the people you socialize with? What would you say to them if they're of a different race? How would you interact with them? How would the coward David Hines interact with Indian colleagues or his students? How would he teach them anything? He's at a university in the United States. I'm sure they would be across the board, every race in his class. How would he do that? How is Takuma Ogunse and the others? how are they going to interact with their other party members? How are they going to interact with other Guyanese? How would they hope to persuade Guyanese of other ethnicity to support them? You ever wondered why they've been in the political wilderness their entire lives? It's because the only way that politicians and political parties have success is by bringing people together, is by having a big tent that everyone can fit under. We've all heard President Ali preaching and pleading with the nation on one Guyana, that we are all one people. You've heard the Vice President repeatedly say there is no place for racism in Guyana. You have heard that since the Vice President was president. He was saying that. You've heard our current President Ali outline a vision of one Guyana, promoting it, putting it into practice, trying to get people to come together, trying to get communities to come together, trying as best he can with this economic upturn to make sure that there is equality. You see that every day. You see funding for roads. It benefits everybody. Roads benefit everybody. I've never driven on a road in Guyana and anyone has asked me for an ID or a passport or my ethnicity. Roads are for everybody. Public, any member of the public. The roads that are being built, the house lots that are being distributed across Guyana. Everybody. You see that in real terms. Now, in the previous 5 years of the APNU government, when they wanted to promote the people and to promote the Guyanese people that we were rich and we would give everybody $1 million, $5,000, and then we had the mathematical genius who is now the chairman of the PNC saying what it works out to, and you could give everybody $1 million. These nonsensical things. These are fanciful. I don't want to swear. I really don't want to swear today, but this is fanciful nonsense. No country could be built on that. It has to be built collectively. And we have to, if we are going to be successful as a country, resist this hate speech. We must call it out. We must charge the perpetrators. We must prosecute them. We must make sure that people who are preaching hate understand consequences. And the consequences should not be mild. But it takes us as a people to stand up to say we would not tolerate that. And we have to do that. And whenever there's hate speech, and whenever people are making it, you must call them out for it. Don't just ignore it. Don't just say nobody's heard it. I mean, who in heaven's name has heard of Takuma Ogunse in the last 10 years? What following does he have? He, like David Hines, are irrelevant to the political landscape of this country. They are irrelevant to the fabric of its society. They are dinosaurs, bitter old men who, when was their chance and their opportunities, their views kept them thankfully from the reign of power. Now they're up in the ante. And they wouldn't step aside. The time for the race rhetoric The time for racial hatred is gone. Guyana must keep that in its past. We must keep that with the dinosaurs. We must keep it extinct. Lord knows, Guyana cannot go through that again. And the small statements that have been made repeatedly by the cowards like Burke and Hines overseas, and then you notice local people saying it. Now, condemnation has come, and even condemnation of the leader of APNU. The opposition leader was apparently present or shared the platform when the first two speakers spoke. And from what I've read, members of his party have criticized that he did not condemn it. Regrettably, the statements that initially came of three party members, Ms. Chandan was later, but the initial three party members, the statement was, pardon me, but it was wishy-washy. It wasn't firm. It was playing political games. It was saying, though this was so, it should not have been so. But call out the statement it did. And the difference in views otherwise are the difference in views. But noticeably, is the only members of APNU that have called out the statement are Indo-Guyanese. And that is most unfortunate. There should be others within APNU who find this repulsive, who find this repugnant to nation building in a country. Interestingly, Mr. Ramjatan has said nothing. WPA and those persons who subscribe or still subscribe to that party, they're Guyanese and they're entitled to their views, but they're not entitled to divide us. They're not entitled to tell us how we should treat our fellow Guyanese. And they're not entitled to tell us that we should stand for violence against our fellow Guyanese. They're not entitled to tell you to pick up arms. They're not entitled to do those things. Civilized societies don't work that way. And it is time we take a firm stand and call them out for what they are. They're bitter, divisive, racist. And they must be called out for that. And we mustn't tolerate it. We mustn't tolerate them anywhere when they espouse those views. People should not be tolerated when they espouse those views. They shouldn't be allowed. And they should face criminal penalties. I feel very strongly about that. I wonder where is Christopher Ram and all his rhetoric of preaching when the Vice President said, made a speech in Berbice, he filed criminal charges. When you saw what the whole speech was, there was no foundation for a charge. Selectively taking apart. But he sits on his hands now and he says nothing. If memory serves, I believe he was indeed a member of the WPA. God forbid he shares those views. Where's the Guyana Human Rights Association, they're called, and Mr. McCormack, and whoever else you claim to be trustees? Where are you? Why wouldn't you condemn those statements? Why wouldn't you say something about it? And who are the board of trustees of GHRA? I can't remember the names. I'd gotten a list of who are the people claiming to be. They're not very many of them who claim to be. But where are all of you? You know who you are. And I will list all of you on a Facebook post that you're sitting on your arse and doing nothing about it. You sit on your hands when people are preaching hate. In the hope of what? Isn't that a human right? But GHRA is quiet. Where's Red Tread, who's so quick to condemn everything under the sun? except for 5 years of APNU government, said not one thing about elections, not one thing about the no confidence motion and the government staying in for more than a year. All of these agencies which receive funding, I'm sure, they can't survive if they didn't receive funding. Well, what are your principles? What are your objectives? What are your purpose? But why are you sitting on the sidelines? Why are you sitting on the sidelines? There could only be one answer, because all of the attacks that have come from the three speakers that I've shown you attack Indo-Guyanese. So it is clear that your stance is you will not speak up for or have any interest in protecting Indo-Guyanese rights. I'm not asking you to protect Indo-Guyanese rights. I'm asking you to protect all Guyanese rights. Be clear about that. But here is a person that is making racially charged statements directed at Indo-Guyanese, and you do nothing. That can't be right. And we must not allow them and the membership of those organizations and the people who promulgate them to sit to say that they have some sort of moral high ground and they are in this and that. Society should not tolerate them anymore in those places. Please. They don't belong there. They are selective. And by sitting on the sidelines and doing nothing, you are equally reprehensible. You can't choose. No Guyanese can choose to represent Afro-Guyanese interests at the expense of the other Guyanese. No Guyanese should promote Indo-Guyanese interests at the expense of the others. And no Guyanese should preach hatred, that we should hate each other and take up guns against each other. Every Guyanese should be angry when you speak of any race. Guyana is such an intertwined country. We went to school with each other. We grew up with each other. We work with each other. There's never been realistically a divide that you can draw a clear line through. And we mustn't allow people to come in and do that. Do not, no matter what's your ethnicity, does not give you the right to say negative things or attack any other ethnicity. And when it happens to one, it happens to all. It should be wrongly condemned. Not because you criticize the Portuguese, that everybody should stay and only the Portuguese must speak up. That should never be the case. Everybody should condemn it. If you attack Afro-Guyanese, not only the Afro-Guyanese should stand up, all Guyanese. The same is true for Indo-Guyanese. All should stand up because we are one. And we must see each other as one. And don't take being disgruntled with whether you're paid enough, disgruntled about what the government is doing this and you think they should do this. Everybody's got a different view. Understand that. Everybody has got a view that suits them. Governments can't work that way. Governments have to take a view that benefits the collective. That's how it works. So ladies and gentlemen, please, the attacks that are coming and the incitement must be met with the full force of the law, and they must be rejected by the people. And organizations that pretend to have interest in human interests, social interests, and human rights, that don't want to stand up, we must reject them. We must remove them from having any say or influence in what happens because they are being selective, and that suits no one. That is a benefit to no Guyanese. Understand that. When you don't stand up for your fellow Guyanese, you're a benefit to no one. You're not helping anyone. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, for sharing your time with me, for making comments. I've noticed that we have quite a bit of comments this evening. And hopefully we understand that we must live together. We're all in this together. This is Guyana. One people. This is who we are. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Good night, and as always, may your God be with you.